Hi, today we have Dr. Melanie Joy with us. And the reason why I brought Dr. Melanie was because I love working with doctors who have had a chronic illness because I feel like they can resonate with people like us who are going through troubled times, who feel sick and aren't feeling well. And it's different for a doctor and their perspective if they've been healthy all their life, but they know everything in the textbook versus someone who's actually experienced it. So Dr. Melanie is here today. She's a naturopathic doctor, and I'll let her share some of her story. She also has a PhD, which is incredible because you don't really find naturopathic doctors with a PhD these days. It's very rare. So I'll let her share her story as well.
Thank you, Sweta. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Absolutely. So yeah, I was diagnosed with a heart condition, and I was having a lot of symptoms. It was very painful. I had chronic fatigue, and I basically refused the doctor's diagnosis. And I began seeing holistic practitioners and natural doctors to try to figure out why I was having symptoms. And that was when I started to get answers. And so I saw many different practitioners, but the one that really made the greatest impact on me was someone that did muscle testing. So I had done all kinds of lab work and lab testing, but this particular practitioner did muscle testing and determined right away that there was so much gut inflammation that my heart was not getting the nutrients that it needed. And so it really showed me, like, okay, my heart is the part of my body that's giving me these symptoms, but that's not really where the main problem is. And so I did a lot of antimicrobial protocols, like getting rid of parasites, getting rid of candida, bacteria. And so I took a lot of herbs, I took homeopathics, I took supplements. I had to change my lifestyle. I had to change my diet. And I was able to reverse the heart condition. And it was a journey. It was a process. It wasn't overnight. I had to put into practice, each step I had to put into practice, new lifestyle changes. And so at that point, because it almost went, I felt like I was like 80 years old and like on my deathbed. I mean, I just had no energy. And to all of a sudden, I got my life back. It was like having a second chance. It was, I didn't have any more pain. I had an echocardiogram and they said, you don't have the heart condition any longer. And I felt so much different. I could no longer stay in my current career, which was teaching. So I ended up leaving my teaching career. I ended up getting my master's degree in alternative medicine. I ended up studying functional medicine. And then throughout my journey, there was another piece of the puzzle that was unfolding, which was the emotional, spiritual connection. And so that's when I wanted to get my PhD in Christian counseling so that I could apply that whole aspect of, feeling our emotions and speaking out and expressing ourselves. And so I'm actually not a naturopathic doctor. And in the state of Florida, naturopathic doctors aren't licensed, so there really isn't naturopathic doctors out here. So I do just have my PhD in Christian counseling, but I use that along with my training in functional medicine and alternative medicine to help my clients to go from their symptoms to leading a normal life. And that requires someone who's been there and someone who can walk with them, in that journey.
That's incredible. And in this practice, do you also use muscle testing?
Yes, after I graduated, I studied under Dr. Yulin, and he teaches nutrition response testing. He's a chiropractor, And it's a system that determines the root cause of the symptoms on the body. So there are other ways to determine, if there's an infection or heavy metals or chemicals. There's lab work that we can do lab work too, but I feel very comfortable with the muscle testing, and I use it with all my clients.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got muscle testing done at one point as well. And it was interesting because I did acupuncture, I did muscle testing, I had these herbal teas, and like every single one of these practitioners told me my thyroid was never the issue. It was something else, but nobody could really pinpoint what it was. And then a naturopathic doctor had used something with like needles. She put like needles between my fingers. I don't know. It's like a really old school method, but found out it was my adrenals. And I was taxing my adrenals this whole time. So, muscle testing is very unique in the sense that it allows you to understand where the trauma is within your organs and within your body, and how to get rid of that. And maybe you can share, like, do you have anybody that you used it for who had Hashimoto's?
Absolutely. It's very common. And so you're absolutely right. Sometimes the thyroid, you'll have what'll seem like thyroid symptoms, but the thyroid is so closely related to the adrenals that a lot of times the problem is really the adrenals. And that will actually show up to where someone will come in with fatigue or hair shedding or estrogen dominance or digestive issues. And when I do the testing, what'll show up as the number one organ that we need to work on is the adrenals. And so, of course, when the adrenals show up, we want to test them for stress. If they have cortisol, high cortisol, low cortisol, if what their sleeping pattern is, what their stress is like. And then I also want to check them for things like electrolytes for hydration, vitamin C. Sometimes we'll use glandulars if someone is testing for them. That's why I like nutrition response testing too, because I can just, test right away to see kind of, what supplement that someone is going to need. And then, yes, everything is all connected. And so a lot of things do go back to the gut. And sometimes we can even take it a step further in that there could really be something affecting the nervous system that is affecting the gut, which can create a hormone imbalance, which can affect the thyroid and the adrenals too. So the whole body is connected. So someone with Hashimoto's, it's really about, simplifying everything and really fine tuning. Well, okay, you've got this diagnosis, but let's take it a step back. Let's look at the big picture and see, okay, what was missed? Because if you're still having symptoms, something has been missed.
That's so interesting. Yeah, and with Hashimoto's, it's a lot of these symptoms that I had weren't even really Hashimoto's that was causing all of this, because a lot of women, I notice, especially within my organization, they still have these symptoms even when their levels are normal.
Mm-hmm.
And these medical doctors, they treat them for their thyroid, but they're not treating them for their antibodies, which is where the inflammation is.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you go about that?
So you're saying when there's elevated antibodies?
Yeah.
So when there's elevated antibodies, that is telling us that there is essentially an autoimmune reaction that's taking place. And when those antibodies are elevated, that's telling me, okay, the body is on high alert, and we need to figure out why it's on high alert. So the body it's giving this signal on lab work, right? Really, where that issue is taking place is in the gut. So in the gut, if there is leaky gut, if there's gut lining inflammation, If there is an imbalance of beneficial to non-beneficial bacteria, then that means there could be toxins recirculating through the body. And so what will happen is if someone has, we'll call it leaky gut, let's say there's an undigested food protein or there's a heavy metal or chemical. And if it gets out into the bloodstream, now all of a sudden there's going to be at least one or two organs that are saying, we're on high alert. We're trying to send out the alarm that there's a problem. So what we really have to assess is, where is the toxin coming from and what toxin is it? So a lot of times we can see those numbers go down if someone isn't already gluten-free, or, just even we could look at the most common, foods that people are sensitive to: wheat, dairy, corn, eggs, soy, cane sugar. We have to remove those foods if there's elevated antibodies. And then let's say someone comes in and they've already changed their diet. Then we have to look at, is there a heavy metal toxicity? Is there a chemical exposure or toxicity? With the thyroid, especially relating to minerals, on a hair mineral test, the thyroid ratio is the calcium-potassium ratio. So if this person is low in calcium and potassium, their thyroid can be low. So a lot of times we have to help the thyroid come back into balance by balancing out the calcium-potassium ratio. And where we will see this with symptoms is if someone has a lot of fatigue. So when there's elevated Hashimoto's antibodies, we really have to look at, there has to be a toxin. There's something, there's something within the body that it's trying to get rid of, and it's causing the thyroid to be on high alert.
That's so true. And with me, I think it was in my cells, which was hard to detect because you can do a GI map test and you can do a blood test. And I found there was like EBV in my blood, HHV6, but in the stool test, there was no EBV. So it's kind of a fight to know where these bugs are and how you can get rid of them, especially if they're in your cells. So I totally agree with that. And you also touched upon neurological issues with Hashimoto's, and this was something that was very interesting because a lot of women I meet, they have a lot of anxiety, like in like almost their mind doesn't stop, and they don't know how to stop it. So how do you go about dealing with like anxiety and Hashimoto's?
So one thing we have to determine with anxiety, because there's a couple different types of anxiety. So there can almost be a physical anxiety that is caused from a hormone imbalance or an infection or a heavy metal or a lack of sleep, or if someone isn't eating regularly throughout the day, if they're not getting enough protein, they may have the symptom of anxiety. Or it can be more emotional, if someone has traumas or emotional stressors that they've never dealt with, or they're kind of avoiding a certain emotion that they don't know how to process. And the body, if you don't know how to process it, your body's just going to store it. And especially when it comes to the thyroid will store the emotions of injustice. And really, the thyroid is all about speaking out. So if we're not saying something that we need to say, or we feel like there's been an injustice done, then that can trigger anxiety. So we really have to kind of get down to the root cause of, okay, your body is going into fight or flight. And so we can, if it's emotional and trauma related, we can give someone some grounding techniques that can help them to stay in the present moment because anxiety can really be more of a way that we're trying to control the future. And so we can really give grounding techniques to, keep us in the safe place, keep us in the present moment, so that we're out of that fight or flight. Our body thinks we're safe. And if our body knows that we're safe, then our mind is naturally going to have a calming effect. So we kind of have to determine, is the anxiety, is it physical? Is it emotional? And then kind of go from there.
So, if the thyroid is not speaking out, then what is the adrenals?
Adrenals are fear and paranoia. And I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything else with the adrenals. Mostly it's fear and paranoia with the adrenals.
In our current, external environment, I can totally see all of these sort of emotions come out of not only us, but even healthy people or functional people. And it's hard to process when you already feel alone dealing with an illness like this. But at the end of the day, I think, how do you help people let go? How do you help people get their peace back?
So I use a lot of tools, especially if we're working on the emotional side. I really like the book. It's Releasing Emotional Patterns with Essential Oils. And she gives essentially phrases that you can kind of tell yourself when you're going through one of those types of triggering emotions. So I want to see if I can remember, or maybe I can pull it up. Yep, because I have my book right here. So for the thyroid, which is injustice, she would have you say, so an injustice is something that's like not fair. And so she would have you think about, okay, well, where in your life or when in your life did you maybe feel like something wasn't fair? And that may be currently in the present moment, or maybe it could be something from the past. And then you would think about a resolution, and almost in your body feel like, okay, well, what would resolution feel like within my system? And then you would say the phrase, I accept the truth. And then she uses the essential oil Sacred Mountain, which has like cedar and spruce. And so in this book, she has that for every single organ and system. And so I usually start off with that first, because when someone has been through trauma, it's sometimes harder to connect the mind and the body. And so, sometimes you can almost, if you're talking about emotions and someone has been traumatized and they've been avoiding their emotions for their whole life, this is a tool to help you understand and connect with that mind-body step. So this is like a beginner step. And then I also like to use tapping. So I'll write out a script of like emotional freedom technique, and I'll teach them, how to do the tapping, where the points are, and I'll write it out for them. And especially if someone's like a Christian, they may want to put scripture verses at the bottom, or, whatever someone's comfortable with. But basically you're stating and acknowledging a negative emotion as you do the tapping. And then you're going to re-tap and you're going to state the truth and positive emotions. And I would say tapping is a little bit beginner too, as well. But that usually really helps to decrease the anxiety, just simply because those two steps right there, you're acknowledging your soul. And when you're acknowledging your soul, it's kind of like if like a little kid is like tugging on your arm and you're like, okay, what do you need? And they stop tugging. And so your soul is like, okay, like they saw me, like they heard me.
That makes sense. Wow. So, when somebody comes in with Hashimoto's, you start with this book, and then you try to help them with their gut. one thing I noticed when healing my gut and working on that piece is that the results don't like come right away. So even though I got rid of the viruses and parasites and infections, the antibodies didn't go down right away. They gradually started going down. Is that something you normally experience, or?
It really depends on how quickly someone can apply lifestyle changes with the supplements and with detox. So the number one game changer when it comes to detox is going to be coffee enemas, saltwater enemas, or colonics. Now, there are other types of things to process toxins.
Mm-hmm.
There's foot detoxes. There's supplements that are binding supplements. There's going in the infrared sauna. Simply just getting active and walking or stretching, anything that kind of gets your lymphatic system moving. The most powerful thing you can do to get toxins out of your system is going to be a coffee enema. And so, because the elevated antibodies are telling me there's still a toxin and it's probably hanging out in the gut. So even if we have them on all the right supplements, if we are not constantly cleaning out the gut, they're still going to have elevated antibodies.
You're so right. I mean, I am like a big fan of coffee enemas. Every doctor I've worked with has never been a fan of them. Like, they told me not to do it. But I don't know, for me, like, I do it twice a week because I feel like it leaves me clarity. It cleans out my system. It cleans out the liver. And I mean, I've never tried the colonic, but do you prefer it over those other two?
So the coffee enema or the saltwater enema are really going to clean out the lower colon.
Uh-huh.
And of course, the coffee enema, if you're retaining it, it will help with the liver. The colonic is going to get deeper. So the colonic, you could do 2 coffee enemas, and I've been in this situation where I'm like, I'm totally cleaned out. I'm going to go do my colonic. It's going to be like just water. It will go through the colonic, and the water will get in so deep, almost like over into almost like where the large intestine would meet the liver, which is really far over. That's a long stretch of your large intestine. And it will pull down things that the coffee enema just couldn't reach. It's just especially with the colonic, because that the speculum is inserted and you're just resting, it's comfortable. So there's no pain, but you're just laying on your back. I mean, the coffee enema, you're kind of up and down, you're, inserting, and it's all over the place. With the colonic, you're just laying on the table, it's inserted, and you're not going anywhere. So you can get more fluid, which means you're going to be pulling down more.
And that's like amazing, because for me, I've been telling the doctors I used to work with for a very long time that, like, they gave me all these gut cleanses, they gave me a lot of supplements. I'm like, your pills are not digesting, like, they're not working, they're absorbing, and they're like, yeah, but they have to work. This is like the strongest gut cleanse on the market right now. And it was so interesting because I said, how bad is my body in shape if the strongest pill on the market is not working for a gut cleanse? So I one day decided to just, try the coffee enema. I said, what do I have to lose?
Exactly.
And it made me feel so much better. And I've been referring it to everyone I know because I feel like it's the most, I think it's the most like optimal way of detoxing. Would you agree? Or?
Absolutely. I mean, it's literally the fastest detox. You can do it from home. It's so affordable. You can do it in your own time. And yeah, you will feel better afterwards. You're right. You get that mental clarity, you get energy, you get motivation back. And I kind of like to think of it as for most of us, we missed many opportunities to cleanse our body because we didn't grow up with, a parasite cleanse every year, or, taking a rest from certain foods. So it's like all of a sudden you're 20, you might have missed 18 opportunities, once a year to cleanse your body. And so it's like coffee enema, it's a way for you to assist your body in cleansing.
So is that like one of the first steps you usually take with the people you work with?
It really depends on the case. I do like to build a little bit of a relationship and a little bit of a trust. And it's usually not the number one first thing I recommend. Um, it's definitely something I try to introduce. It really depends on if they're comfortable with that step or not. It's like, it's something where they really have to take responsibility for their health, and not everyone is at that step right away. So for some people, I may baby step them into it. And for some people, I may say, you've done everything and you have to do this or you're not going to see the results.
That's so true, and nothing works right away. One of the things I've heard is that it causes a lot of mineral loss. How do you feel about that?
So I think with coffee enemas, they have shown that there can be some electrolyte loss, like potassium and sodium. I usually just tell my clients to make an adrenal cocktail with, your quarter teaspoon mineral salt, your quarter teaspoon of cream of tartar, little bit of coconut water or water with lemon, and you can just replenish your minerals if you're doing the enemas.
That's so true. And I think that, like when cleaning the gut and like trying to get into every place, it's hard to sort of just use one thing, right?
Hmm.
um, oh, go ahead.
You mean like as far as supplements?
Yeah, it's hard to just rely on one source of detoxing. So do you turn to like multiple sources of detoxing, or how do you go about it?
Yes. So it really depends on kind of what's going on and what this person can handle. So like a foot detox is gentle. There's, lymphatic dry brushing. There's even like gentle massage work can, help the lymphatic system. There's the infrared sauna. And of course, with the diet, if someone's diet is really clean, that's going to help their body detox, if we've removed that type of inflammation. And then depending on what infections I find, we may put them on, if let's say we find a parasite, I may test them for a different parasite cleanses or different, anti-parasite herbs like cloves or wormwood. Or there's a couple products I like intestinal sweep, or like Dr. Christopher's makes an INF infection formula. And these are just herbs that help to change the environment, of what is going on in the gut. When we combine all of those things together, that's when someone is going to see results. So if someone's just taking a supplement, you might not notice a difference if their diet isn't in check, or if they're staying up really late, or if there's a lot of stress in their life. It's like, well, if you have all those things going on, we're going to have to do a whole 180 and apply a whole new system.
Hmm. Yeah, and a lot of people are not willing to give up their ways, not willing to change, even though they have these symptoms. So I bet that's a tough thing to do. And even with autoimmune conditions, have you seen like people overcome them through just detoxing, fixing their emotions, and um, I mean, of course, you have to repair the gut.
Yes. So it all starts with repairing the gut and supporting any of the other organs that are unbalanced. Let's say their gallbladder needs support, or their liver, or whatever they're coming in with in their particular body that was the weakest link. Could have been a kidney issue or adrenals or thyroid. And then, so we address that. And that kind of brings someone out of that really highly inflammatory stage. And then I think minerals are a really key component in healing. And especially when someone has had infections, they've been chronically dehydrated. And so the minerals really help to hydrate them, which again can help with brain fog and energy and muscles and just giving them motivation, the motivation to, get up and go to work, especially if there's heavy metals, which I see a lot with autoimmune cases. The heavy metals just zap your energy and you just don't want to get out of bed. You just don't have any motivation and you have the brain fog. So a lot of times with the autoimmune cases, they will need a lot of minerals to rebalance. And that takes time. And, I actually used to be on natural desiccated thyroid. And after I did mineral balancing and took the amount of minerals that I needed over a couple of years, I was able to get off the thyroid medication. So that is something that the mainstream medical field doesn't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about you getting off of thyroid medication. And that's because they don't have any solutions. But when we repair these tissues and we give them what they want, then the autoimmune symptoms aren't there. So yep, it takes minerals, it takes detox, it takes gut healing, it takes correcting their weakest link.
So
and
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So what type of minerals do you go by? Because there's so many brands out there, there's so many supplement companies, and you never know which ones are legit from which ones that are just phony, right? Mm-hmm. Which one do you prefer?
Yes. So the main 4 minerals that almost everyone needs, the macro minerals, are calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. These are the ones that if they're out of balance, all the micro minerals are going to be affected. So the main 4, calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, those are the best ones to focus on. So calcium, my favorite type of calcium is going to be calcium from the bone matrix, because, before, there was processed foods, people were eating the whole animal. They were making bone broth, and they would even crush bones and put it in their soups, and you wouldn't necessarily taste it. But that's how they were getting their minerals. That's how they were getting their calcium. So I like, it's called calcium microcrystalline hydroxyapatite. And there's a, Karuna makes hydroxycal, and it has that type of calcium. Actually, Now brand has a good type of that calcium. And I believe Douglas Labs has one too. And then for magnesium, kind of depends on what is going on with the person. If they really need a lot of relaxation, trouble sleeping, I'll maybe lean toward magnesium glycinate. Or if they really are struggling with energy, I may have them take magnesium malate in the morning, which helps with the cellular magnesium. And then for potassium, there's 2 kinds I really like. The potassium chloride powder. This powder, I just will never not be out of a bottle of it. It's probably the cheapest supplement. I think it's like $5. You can get it on iHerb or Vitamin Shop. Now, potassium chloride powder. It helps to boost your stomach acid, so it helps with digestion. It helps with energy. It says on the bottle, I want to say 1/4 of a teaspoon is around like 600 milligrams. And we really need close to 4,000 milligrams a day. Yeah. So you can use it in your adrenal cocktail. I mean, you could easily do 1/4 teaspoon twice a day to just, get you up to even 1,200. So that potassium, I also like potassium orotate. Now that's going to be in the capsules. I like that one because it can be absorbed pretty well. Sometimes with the potassium, I have an issue because it's such a low amount. Like it may be like 99 milligrams, and you might need like 2,000. So the capsules and potassium doesn't always work. And then there's salt. So this is going to mean when you're choosing to season your food, you want to use the pink Himalayan, the Celtic, or the real salt, the salt that has the minerals, and seasoning all your food with the salt, not worrying about anything low salt. And of course, if you do an adrenal cocktail, you can put a quarter teaspoon in there if you need it as well. Not everyone is going to need extra salt, especially if you're seasoning your food with salt. So not everyone always needs the extra salt if there's enough in their food.
Wow. So you, in the citrate, what about like potassium citrate? Is that like not really absorbed?
Potassium citrate is okay, actually, and in certain situations, like if someone has kidney stones, potassium citrate actually is really good because it can actually help to dissolve those kidney stones. So in certain cases, I like it. My only issue is the dosage, because I can give someone more potassium if they are comfortable with the lifestyle change of using the potassium chloride powder. Then they're going to get more potassium and they will need less supplements.
I so agree. One thing I noticed was when I started filling myself up with minerals, trace minerals, I didn't feel as hungry. I didn't have cravings. And I think that was the sign that, you know, your body is healing in some way.
Yes, I've had people tell me that they'll make, when they get enough salt, they notice they have less cravings and less sugar cravings.
That's so interesting. And in terms of, okay, so we spoke about neurological changes, we spoke about the gut, we spoke about, you know, the hormone balances and how to get that. We spoke about detoxing. Is there any other step we're missing here to get rid of this autoimmune response?
So I think whenever there's a chronic illness present, there's usually like a deeper message, and each person has to determine what it is that their body has been communicating to them. And so when you're on this road to chronic illness, if we only focus on the gut, or we only focus on detox or digestion or energy, and we forget, okay, your body is actually trying to tell you something. Like maybe there needs to be a boundary established somewhere. Maybe there's a toxic person in your life and your body wants that door shut so that you can feel safe. Maybe there's a time period where you need to speak up and speak out. So I think with chronic illness, the most important thing is that there is a message that the body is trying to communicate. And when we can almost picture ourselves, you know, a spirit, a soul, and a body, and our physical body, it basically represents our soul. And if we have hurts, repressed emotions, or if we're just, you know, disconnected from that part of us, we're going to miss it somewhere. And so I think with chronic illness, it's important that we don't just get so caught up in the lab work and the symptoms, but that we really think like, what is my body really saying here? And when we can, instead of, you know, the why me, but really look at, what do I need to change? What do I need to take responsibility for? You know, what is my body trying to say to me? And a lot of times that is something that only we can really answer. You know, so even me as a practitioner, I mean, there's so many points I can guide someone on and lead them to, but ultimately they're going to have to listen to what their body is saying. They may need to go to bed earlier, and they can fight that all they want, but until they get to bed earlier and their liver has the ability to process those hormones and process toxins, they might not see a change. So I think it just really gets back to listening to our body.
That's so true. I mean, it took me a trip around the world and back to know that, you know, this was my fourth autoimmune condition. And I was determined not to have any more of these conditions, and really understand why and what my purpose was. And if I didn't go through these, I wouldn't know what my mission is in life. I mean, I went from tech to immersing myself in health, which was my passion all along, but tech kind of, it was easy, it made me money, and I kind of rode that wave for a while, but it wasn't meaningful, it wasn't fulfilling.
Mm.
So you're so right. And I want to leave them. I know we talked about so many different things here, from trace minerals to detoxing to neurological issues that you may face and how to overcome them. What are like your top three takeaways from this interview?
So when it comes to thyroid, I think one of the main things is our voice. So speaking out, um, upping the detox. You probably need to do a coffee enema if someone hasn't, just taken that step and kind of just read, research, and dive into it. And then just, beginning to notice what your body's saying, and beginning to the process of just listening to your body, and just approaching your body with love instead of criticism and judgment, but just really, kind of shifting your mindset to, a more loving and caring mindset towards your body.
So, how often do you suggest doing the coffee enema? I mean, I told you I do it twice a week, but before I was doing it every other day, and then I kind of just tapered down. But do you have like a suggestion, or it's
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned you started out with every other day and then you taper down. That's usually what I would recommend to my clients too, is, why don't you try one and see how it goes. And then, maybe you want to do them once a week, or maybe you want to do them twice a week. Or if you're really having a lot of symptoms, you may do them every other day and then kind of taper down. I think, everyone just kind of has to figure out how it's going to fit with their lifestyle. For some people, if you can commit to one a month, go there. If you can commit to one a week, do that. If you notice you do twice a week and you can be a better mom or a better wife, or have less pain, I say stick with that. I think a lot of times we'll see them more frequently the more symptoms there are. So the more symptoms, or if someone's dealing with a really serious chronic issue, you need to do more. But if you're getting towards maintenance, you might do them once a month.
right? Yeah, you're so right. It just depends on what you're comfortable with, and there's a lot of things against the coffee enema, but I mean, I don't think that it's something that's not beneficial to us. I think it's something our body naturally needs to do, is to let go, detox, and I think, doctor, from a doctor's perspective, is like your body's like not going to be able to detox on its own if you
Mhm.
use something that helps it. But that's with anything. Like, wouldn't you agree? It's like with laxatives, it's with anything somebody can use to detox their body. Aloe vera.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Someone could abuse a laxative. The coffee enema is different in a sense. It actually improves digestion. It's non-addictive. It's not going to affect the beneficial bacteria negatively. So it's one of the safest tools that you can have at your fingertips. I mean, it's not dangerous. Um, it really just helps your body to even absorb nutrients better because there's going to be less toxins. So I think um, there is a fear about, natural health in our medical system, but coffee enemas, I mean, there's even been recordings of like ancient Egyptians using coffee enemas, or
So
using some type of enema.
that's
So
true. And with that, I want to respect your time because I think we're going a little bit over here. And I want to sort of kind of close it up with the last few messages. And if you want to get in touch with Dr. Melanie, how do they get in touch with you?
So on my website, it's drdrmelaniejoy.com. And there's a contact box on there, and they can contact me through there.
Thank you so much for sharing all this amazing information. I learned a lot. I'm sure that everyone here has learned a lot as well. And I'll make sure that they get in touch with you. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Melanie.
Thank you for having me.